This is Tech Support. I am Matt O'Reilly, Manager of Events and Classroom Experience at the University of Toronto, Mississauga.
I'm Luke Johnson. I'm the Project Manager at CTI in Little Rock, Arkansas. So we have a few questions from members that we're going to go over today. I guess let's get after it.
Sounds great. Can't wait.
So, Matt, how do you identify and engage key stakeholders during the planning phase of a project to ensure that end-user needs and expectations are effectively captured and addressed?
I mean, obviously, I think we both meet with a lot of end users.
Absolutely.
And meeting with them frequently is key. Having open communication, honest communication. I think certainly trying to develop in their heads what they're going to be using the system for
Sure.
future use is really important, because they only think about what I'm going to use the system for now.
Right. And I think that, the stakeholders for a project aren't always just limited to the end users too. You've got a lot of different aspects of people who you need to know in a project life cycle. I mean, so for instance, in my job, I'm doing all kinds of different kinds of projects. We're doing brand new casinos and we do some hospitals and universities and such. So identifying, making sure that who is in charge of a job site is important. But those key interactions with end users are really what drives that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point that you're saying, there are stakeholders that you may not think about. It may be a math department asking for a room.
Right.
But you may not realize that the students can be stakeholders, the staff
Absolutely.
that can be stakeholders, the higher-ups. Facilities are obviously major stakeholders, because 9 out of 10 times we're going to require some kind of renovation.
Churches are another difficult one to identify stakeholders in sometimes too, because you're trying to find who is it who has the vision for the project, and what is that vision. They can be the end user, but they're not typically, and so making sure you've got those people identified early is what needs to happen.
Okay, so risk management, Luke. In a project involving the design and installation of a system for end users, what strategies do you implement to identify potential risks associated with user adoption, and how do you plan for mitigation?
That's a good question. So for me, I think the main thing that has to happen is you have to make sure that you do an effective site visit. I think a lot of people, I've seen this for many years, will not do an adequate site visit, and they're probably getting rough dimensions of rooms and not actually getting clear information to the design team. And I think in those situations, you definitely run risk of designing systems that don't meet the needs of the space. And it kind of going back to the first question, making sure that you're engaging with the person who has the vision for the project, and like trying to meet with them on the site visit that you're doing, and the site survey, I think is key.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say also setting expectations very early with the end user. Like you said, it goes back to that first question, trying to really establish what it is they're looking for and what they're expecting, because that's typically where the risks come in. The
Right.
Change orders, the last minute, oh, I really wanted it to do this. And then even when the system is finally commissioned, just working through training with them or with key stakeholders
Right.
that are going to be consistently using the space. Because I found that, you train a technology manager or one person on the staff, and it's never that one person who uses the room. It's always someone else that's got some kind of either phobia of dealing with technology, or they have some, they have some just innate inability to work with a large amount of technology. So setting those meetings, setting the expectations, finding out who you have to meet with, and really focusing on what the commissioning process is going to look like is really going to be important.
Right. That whole the training that you just brought up is really key, because I've always found that if you can if you can identify the person who's going to be doing like training the trainer, that's where that's really effective. If you're with an organization where you've got one key power user that then is going to be able to take that information and discern it to the rest of their, like in a university setting, for example, if you're the manager who's training somebody on how to use a system, those people need to be able to take that information and give it out to all of their lecturers and such.
Yep.
The needs analysis becomes really important in risk management.
Yes, I would agree.
All right. Designing auditoriums. What considerations should be taken into account when designing auditorium acoustics to ensure optimal sound quality for both live presentations and recorded audio?
I think first and foremost is identifying the function of the space. What's going to be coming in there? Is it going to be concert type venue? Is it going to be used as a hybrid type venue, classroom, seminar room? Like what is the ultimate goal of the space? Because if you can't identify that, it's going to be impossible to design any kind of acoustics or any kind of technology around that system.
Right. It's like all these questions are all linked together, isn't it? It's like, we talk about risk and stakeholders and just the design process. It's all one thing, and making sure that you've got as much information as possible. Communication. It's like the most vital thing.
Yeah. No, I would say that for optimal sound quality, obviously, you want to mic a space well, and you want to be able to truly understand, what remote participants may hear, what people in the house are going to hear, because those are two very distinct experiences. And if one suffers, then it's really not meeting the design consideration that you had to go through to begin with, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that whole, getting measurements of the space, not just like physical measurements, but taking readings, audio readings, and being able to use those calculations and picking your products and, putting your design together.
And the one thing that people really, really tend to miss out on is what is surrounding that space. Because I've seen auditoriums that are right above industrial kitchens, they're right beside industrial kitchens,
right.
And the amount of noise that leaks in, or the amount of talking from students or yelling in the hallways can really, really impact the experience in the space.
I agree.
So let's talk about some AV standardization. What are the key challenges that universities face when implementing AV standardization across various classrooms and auditoriums, and how can these challenges be effectively mitigated?
Okay, so that's a little tough right now for me in my current job, but I did used to work as a technology leader in a university setting, the medical science university in Arkansas. So what we tried to do was we try to standardize on systems so that the learning experience would be similar in all of the rooms, and so and operating the systems, and so people would be used to what certain displays look like, and making sure that your UIs that you're putting together for any kind of control systems are consistent from space to space is really important. I think that some of the challenges for standardization are that no two rooms are alike. So, rooms are different and they will react differently to, sound and video. So you can't always just copy paste all the time. Those are where some of the challenges come from.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the other challenges that we face specifically are budgetary ones. Standardization is great, but a lot of these buildings went up at different times. The refresh cycles are on at different times. And you really, you want to get rooms up to a standard, but you also may come across a situation where you just simply can't. And now you're having a different experience across 3 different rooms, and it really, really confounds the end user.
Right.
Additionally, you mentioned undertaking a standard UI. And when you do that, it's great, but you really have to look at when you're going to implement it, how you're going to pilot it, because just changing a UI midstream just like that, it really throws users for a loop,
Absolutely.
and it can really backfire. What's interesting too about that is, I have users who are completely visually impaired. I have users who have different disabilities that or accessibility issues that really can't handle some of the technology in the space. If it's a ton of technology, like in an active learning classroom, you've got 30 projectors in the
yeah.
room, you've got microphones all over the place, and it's just in a state of overwhelm, and it's like it's almost too much, and they start to really withdraw from wanting to use the technology simply because you've built this great standard for these larger spaces, but you're not taking into account those kind of accessibility concerns, right? And it's really difficult because you're never going to hit everything.
No, you're not. And we all know that technology changes at a very rapid rate, but just because technology is changing doesn't mean that we need to be like completely changing the way we do things all the time. Sometimes it really does make sense, but changing technology for technology's sake is not the right way to go.
No, I agree. And I think, that the thing to remember too is that you want standards to be flexible. And like you said, no room is going to be the same. You may have a minimum standard for a room just to make sure that, it's supportable by the service or by the service partner, whoever that may be. And I think that when you have an adaptable and flexible standard, it gives you a little more room to really speak with the client and go back to the client and say, this is what we can support you with, and like how far do you want to take this?
Right.
Because we can go from, beer budget, or we can go champagne budget, but we just really need to know where you want to sit and what makes the most sense for your space.
Yep. Key communication again.
Yep.
All right, this is our last question. Faculty training for hybrid teaching. What strategies can universities employ to support faculty in adapting their teaching methods for hybrid and dual delivery formats, ensuring they effectively engage both in-person and online students? That is a tough one.
Yes. Yeah. It's actually funny because, post-pandemic, a lot of people were very into the hybrid modality, and I'm finding with a lot of different institutions, the faculty are actually starting to resist it a little more, simply because they're either comfortable with just teaching on, in person, or they are wholly uncomfortable with teaching to two discrete groups, and
Right.
it's because they feel one gets disenfranchised.
And it's almost always the remote.
Almost always, and instructors love to see faces. They want to know that you're engaged, and keeping students engaged when they're just a black screen with a name on it, you don't know what that engagement looks like. So, obviously, to support the faculty, it's a lot of training in the technology, but it's also about the faculty willingness to want to be able to teach that way, because there's a very unique way to teach in a hybrid environment versus an online environment versus an in-person environment. And I think it really becomes about meeting them halfway and trying to understand what they want to do.
Right, and it also is very important in whatever, like, UC you're trying to use. A lot of people, some people are very, very comfortable with Zoom, others are not as comfortable with Zoom, and they would rather use Teams. And so making sure that, I think that designing rooms so that they can use Zoom, use Teams, use WebEx is important to keep that flexibility open.
Yeah, I agree. Trying to keep it as UC agnostic as possible, just give them options. But by the same token, you also have to be careful to rein that in, because if you give them too many options, then that's where the resentment starts to come in about it, right?
The other thing would be trying to resist the urge for. I think some of the resistance becomes because they're The teachers want to teach. They don't want to have to be controlling, like I want to see this person on this screen and I want to see this person on this screen. And now I'm showing a PowerPoint and where's my PowerPoint going? So it's trying to keep some automation in some of our designs is important too.
Yeah, take the complexity out of it
Right.
and really try to work with the faculty
Simplifying UIs and such.
and allow them just to focus on what they want, which is the teaching.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah.